Hello everyone, welcome back. This is another video of a project that I did probably about a year ago. Today I'm recording this. It is the end of June 2020. This was a whole cloth embroidery top that was sent to me just plain. It measures 76 inches wide by 80 inches long. It took someone an enormous amount of time to do all this embroidery by hand. I was a little intrepid about starting this project because there was just so much white space waiting to be quilted, and given how much time this client had into all this embroidery was done by hand, and all the amount of time that took, I was just so worried that, or concerned that I didn't screw it up by quilting it the wrong way, the wrong designs, the wrong whatever. So this is what I got, 76 inches wide by 80 inches long. It is square. The photo was just skewed a little bit, but it was square. He was ginormous. And so we talked for a little bit about what she had in mind, and I put together this drawing just on my iPad, just doodling on my iPad. So we knew we wanted crosshatching, we knew we wanted feathers, and to go along with the flowers and the cobblestones and the little bird bath, we decided to put in some butterflies, some birds, and some more frilly flowers all around just to fill in some space. So this video, most of this video talks about what you see here, how I stenciled the top. Well, here we are. The next step to quilting this quilt is pretty much complete. I have it marked. I used stencils to fill in the background areas. Basically, we're going to do some cross-hatching and feathers in the big curling feathers in the corners, filled in with some butterflies with feather tails. Okay, so we're down a little lower now. So there's my butterfly with a tail, and I put in some curling Amish feathers. This is really lightly pounced. I pounced in some birds. There's a light one, there's a darker one right there. And so basically I used my pounce powder, and I used a variety of stencils. So this is by Full Line Stencils. Can you see that? I used this one, and I used some of these. These are just the plastic. So this one happens to be, let me see if I can get it better, a Georgian feather border. And so that I know, well, a couple other ones. There's my birds, bird stencil, and it shows you how to quilt that continuously. So I basically take these stencils and then I use a quilting, not a quilting paper. Hold on, let me get this. Okay, so here we are again. This is sewable Swedish tracing paper. I buy this by the roll, but it's flexible. It's kind of, and I use just ink just an ink pen to draw on there. And then I place the design on the quilt, or on the quilt top, wherever I want it. And I place these first, and I have multiples. I draw out several of them. So that's my bird. And then, you can notice down here, try not to give you motion sickness, but see here, this is the blue wash away pen, and then this is the pounce. I use the pen also in instances where the stencil is way more. So for instance, this is a beautiful Cindy Needham stencil. Let me get a better look at that. You see that? And it's much more elaborate. It's a corner design with all kinds of stuff on it. Well, the only part of that stencil that I wanted was the bird, so I only drew the bird in this case. But because if I were to pounce this, I would get all that other stuff, and then when I went to quilt it, I would most likely accidentally quilt a line that I didn't want. So I drew with the pen just the elements of that stencil that I wanted to use. And same thing with this bigger stencils. This is for the tails of the butterflies. I used that one also. And I drew out several of these. And you can use them right side up, or you can flip them, use the back side. That's the cool part about this paper. It's so thin, but it's very easy to draw on with an ink pen. So, let me show you. Same thing with those big curling feathers. Here's, a couple. I drew a bunch of those, and then there's my stencil. Rotate that so you can see. So that, and then the corner design. Here's the corner. So again, there's the stencil, and there's so same thing. And with the other swags, this is an older one. So there's the stencil of that. I should get this in better light, but so there's that one. So anyway, okay, so in all likelihood, this pounce powder is gonna, because it's powdered chalk. By the time I load this onto my machine, and it's so pretty, and start quilting, I have an 18-inch head, so I'm only quilting, probably 12 inches, front to back at any one time. So how do you keep the pounce on there? Because it's going to come off if you don't treat it somehow. And the best way to treat pounce is with cheap-ass, hairspray. So I sprayed the whole quilt top lightly with hairspray. And that, you got to let it dry before you move it. But that will then set the chalk long enough. And as you know, in your hair, you wash your hair, the hairspray comes out. Well, when we're all done with this, we're going to soak this quilt and wash it, and the chalk and the hairspray and all of it will come out. But there it is, 76 inches wide, 80 inches long, and a whole lot of white space. So you can deal with that white space. In this case, stencils, extensive marking, and the next step is to load it and to quilt it. But this part is done. I now know what I want to quilt in all those open white areas. So the next time you have a quilt with some white space, I hope this gives you some ideas. some tips and tricks on how to handle that, so you're not just looking at a big old white, oh my gosh, how do I quilt this? So best of luck to you. Next step, we'll show some quilting. See ya. So here we are on these last few minutes of this video. You're going to watch me quilt, but I'm going to talk to you a little more about how I went about getting to this point. As always, the first thing that I did after marking everything, loading it onto the long arm, I loaded it sideways. So you can see here the curling Amish feather that goes all up the right side and the left side of the quilt. This is the one that goes up, I think, the right side of the quilt. So this is, I'm nearly done on my first pass of quilting this quilt. And first pass, that means that after I loaded the quilt, I had this area basically on the first part of the quilting. So I started out with quilting this Amish curling feather, sorry, this Amish curling feather. And then once I got the feather done, then I would quilt the crosshatching around it, only to the next area that was feathers or birds or butterflies or the embroidery. In any areas that I didn't feel comfortable for whatever reason quilting at that point, I would just pin baste it. I would just put a pin in any area, open area bigger than my fist, and I would move on. For all the quilting on the white areas, I used, I think it was a long time ago, it was about a year ago I did this, but I'm thinking either 40 weight or 50 weight or even 60 weight white thread. I use, at the time I used So Fine. Anymore I use So Fine and or Glide in the 40, 50, or 60 weight. And because this quilt is basically going to be white on white, you're just going to see the texture. So the thickness of thread really doesn't have that much to say about how this is going to look finished. It looks like I used 100% cotton batting, and we chose that because it's an heirloom quilt, and heirloom is cotton, and this customer really liked the idea of how cotton just kind of, it puckers up. It has the highest rate of shrinkage of all the different battings, and that is a nice thing in a vintage quilt. I'm partial to that myself. So whatever thread you use, it's going to disappear. You're just going to see the texture of the quilting when it's all done. So for all the white areas, the feathers, the cross-hatching, all of that, I used a white, either Glide or So Fine thread. And this is probably So Fine, so probably about a 50 weight. So I would quilt the feathers first, and then around all the feathers and the birds and all the motifs, all the feathers, the birds, the butterflies, all of that, I would put an echo around it because it needs to stand out, because the size of the feathers and the size of the cross hatching is nearly the same. So you got to put something there. You got to create a little bit of a border that's going to make that stand out, make those feathers, those motifs stand out. So you do the feathers, you do the birds, you whatever motifs you've got, and then you echo around it. Again, make it stand out. So we're about to pop into the cross-hatching portion here. So there we go. So with the cross-hatching, the lines, the stenciled lines is really what I went by. I didn't use any of the markings on my rulers. That would take more time. It would take more concentration to do that. And having already stenciled all those lines, it's just making my job so much easier when it comes to the quilting. So I really just keep my ruler a 1/4 inch away from that marked line, and that's how I proceed. Now I'm using 2 different lengths of rulers here. The really long one so that my lines are nice and straight, because I've got some really long distances to cover. And on something like this, if you're off just a little bit, I was afraid that maybe it would show up wonky, and I didn't want that. So I still use my shorter ruler for any short distances because it's just easier to maneuver, quicker to maneuver. And then for any long straightaways, I would switch to the long ruler, and that worked really nicely. So again, traveling through this quilt, again, I have an 18-inch head, which gives me a 12-inch deep sewing area. So for me, there's a lot of rolling the quilt back and forth. So I can only do portions, at a time. So what I'm doing here is filling in around the embroidery. Now, the embroidery, as I came to that, I would switch my top thread only. The bobbin thread stayed the same throughout the entire quilt. But for the embroidery, I switched my top thread to a clear monofilament thread. And I like the Whisper Touch by YLI. They have that in 3 different weights. And I like the heavier weight for the most part, because it doesn't show, especially in tacking down and I do a lot of embroidered quilts, hand embroidered quilts, or machine embroidered quilts, doesn't really matter. And that I literally quilt over the lines of the embroidery with the Whisper Touch, and you cannot see it. You can't see it in the end, and it adds such nice definition. It's beautiful, and that's what I did on this quilt. I used the clear thread in tacking down the embroidery, and then I just cross-hatched all around it. And I can't remember, well, go back to the beginning. I used simple cross-hatching, and then I also added the continuous curves in most of the cross-hatching around each of the motifs, just to help them stand out even better. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you again for watching. You guys have a great summer. Bye-bye.